Why has there, I mean, the absurdity of the simplicity of these two things with this fresh glazed fruit and this fresh glazed donut married together, and I'm eating them together, and it's like heaven on earth.
Right. Yeah. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp, and in this inaugural episode, I sit down with my good friend Ty Hoad, and we talk about food and the memories of food, especially those that we have shared together, which include everything from simple donuts to beautiful Waygu short ribs to the sublime white truffle risotto. And we do this all while enjoying a gin and tonic. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp. This podcast is an avenue to dialogue about the totality of our food experience. Everything from gardening to preparing to eating to hospitality, all rooted in our understanding and beginning with our understanding of the Lord's table. But really, what I want to do is to help us engage in this act in a more holistic way, to understand how its power to transform us is evident every time we gather around a table, for us to experience God's transformative love in real and meaningful ways. And then from that, just to get a better glimpse and better understanding of what it actually means to be human in today's age. And so how did this all begin for me? Well, it really began as I was living in China, of all places, after I finished my undergrad degree. And as I was there and as I was sharing food with other missionaries, I began to just wonder why we actually spent so much time at this table. Why did we linger at the table long after dessert had served, sitting on very uncomfortable chairs, but content to stay, even though that the living room furniture, which was way more comfortable, was a few feet away, and yet we lingered. And so I'm wondering, what is it about food that just calls us and beckons us to linger at this table? What is it about food that just feels qualitatively different than so many other daily activities we engage in? And so as I spent time in China around the table, I was actually reading a book by Eugene Peterson when a light went off. It's his book called Living the Resurrection. And Eugene is one of my favorite authors and has informed my understanding of Christian spirituality and the life we live in more ways than I can recount. But it was in this book that one simple sentence caused the light bulb to go off and sent me on this journey that I've been on for the past 15 or so years. And here's what Eugene wrote. He says, the gospel writers are fond of telling stories of Jesus at meals. The meal was one of their favorite settings for showing Jesus as he revealed himself, talked, worked, and welcomed men and women to him. And it was after reading that one simple sentence that I couldn't help but see food on every page, in every verse, in every chapter, in every book of the Bible. Food plays a huge role from the beginning of creation, when God plants Adam and Eve in a garden and plants trees full of delightful food, good to eat, pleasing to the eye, all around them. And that theme of food runs all the way through Scripture, culminating at the end of times when all of God's creation is made right and we are once again gathered around a table as the marriage supper of the Lamb. And so as I studied Scripture, as I read, it just began to seem to me that whenever God wanted to communicate something of paramount importance, he seemed to use food. Sin entered the world through food. We experience salvation through food, whether that's beginning with the Jewish people and the Passover, or that's continuing with the Lord's Supper each and every time we gather as a people. And so for the past 15 or so years, I've been on this journey, and this journey has taken me places I couldn't imagine. It took me into culinary school. It took me into a renewed relationship with my grandfather that I hope to talk about more later as the show progresses and more episodes are recorded. It's led me to books. It's led me to meeting amazing people and talking with other people about this. And all throughout this, my idea hasn't been just for myself, but I've wanted to help the church understand food, to reclaim the table as a means of formation, a place in which a space is open for us to just be transformed and to be who we are and to settle into something more than just eating. And so I've always wanted to pursue this, but the timing never seemed right. And yet a few months ago, I found myself with more time because I lost my job. which which isn't the greatest way to start a podcast, but it also allowed me an opportunity to think, okay, what's next for me? And as I sat and as I tried to listen to what Jesus was saying to me, it felt like this theme of food and spirituality kept coming back as a passion for mine, as a way to enliven me. And so I thought, well, let's start with a podcast. And so here we are. I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know where this is all going to lead, who's going to be on the podcast. But what I do know is it feels like I need to take this step. And so I hope you join this journey with me and see what happens. And so to start things off with this first episode, I could actually think of no one better to have as my first guest than my good friend, Ty Hoad. And so Tyler Hoad is a follower of Jesus, a missionary to Brazil and Mozambique, husband to Heather, and father of 4. He is the co-founder of E210 Mission, and he loves Liverpool FC, Formula One, and all manner of street food. And yes, I think he still loves the Lakers, but he forgot to mention that. But
I do still love the Lakers.
Good. I was a little worried when you gave me this sentence that the Lakers didn't make an appearance, but welcome to the show, Ty.
Hey, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm thrilled that you're embarking on this endeavor.
Yeah. So you and I have this weird journey of friendship that just sort of showed up in my life. Can you tell the listeners how and why we got to know each other first?
Yeah. So not in the stray cat manner. I just showed up in your life, but
no.
I was part of a Bible study with your father on Saturday mornings, and you had just completed your undergrad and were getting ready to leave for China, and he had requested prayer for his son, whom I'd never met. And I thought that was strange because we'd been in fellowship for a couple of years at that point, but I'd never met you. And so I called you up. We met for coffee, I think the week before you left for China. And we sat outside the Starbucks, and that was it. That was the beginning of, a friendship that has been a real blessing in my life. And I hope it's been, equally fruitful on your side as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And then while I was living in China, Ty was working for a food purchasing place, right? Or I don't even remember what your role was, but
yeah, I was working for a grocery wholesaler in Southern California, and had meetings in China at a trade show, and I thought, I'm on the continent, why not go see Andrew? So took an extra week and took a flight.
Yeah, and so that's when we hung out, and that's really where I remember our friendship blossoming. And and it's a special person who comes all the way to China to visit somebody. And so, Ty and I have shared a lot of experiences together. And that's why I wanted to have him on this episode. But before we talk about what we've shared together over food, which has been a lot, ideally, I would love for these podcasts to be recorded in person as we all sat around a table, sharing food, sharing drinks. But obviously, you're in Brazil right now. I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's not, neither of us have the means in which we can just hop on a jet and just make that happen.
Sadly, I am still a poor missionary.
Right. And I am an unemployed person. So yes, yeah, not going to happen. So actually it was my wife, Claire's idea. She said, well, what if you share a drink with the person? And
God bless the women in our lives.
Exactly. Yes. We're not going to talk about what time we're actually recording this, so you don't judge us. And so, yeah, my hope is at each podcast, if the guest wants to engage in it, we'll share a drink, whether that's coffee, tea, soda, water, or maybe a more alcoholic adult beverage. Or as Claire and I used to call it when we had young kids, we still have young kids, when they were babies and toddlers, we called it attitude adjustment time. And so my hope is to replicate their drink as close as possible. It may not be possible to drink exactly what they're drinking given supplies, but we can at least get close and we can share a drink. And so Ty, what did you choose for us today?
Well, because I'm later in the day than you are, I chose a gin and tonic because it's a rather hot day in Brazil, and I almost chose a caipirinha made with Brazilian cachaça, but then cachaça and caipirinhas have a habit of being a little much. One is too few, and two is too many.
Yes. No, I've heard stories of endeavors. But what is I love a gin and tonic too, and so I'm what there's something so beautiful about a gin and tonic to me. But what is it about for you that besides it's just refreshing?
Really, the refreshment's the first part. The gin part is born out of the original gins were the distillation of the juniper berry, and the Ozark Mountains, where I'm from in Southwest Missouri, you can still buy distilled spirits from vendors um, who grow their own junipers, and so that for me was it. I think when I was of age, and it was a hot summer day, and I think someone offered me a sparkly, zesty drink, and I said, "Ooh, what is this?" And they said, "A gin and tonic," and I said, "Well, I think I like the flavor of that," and thus was born my enjoyment of an afternoon gin and tonic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One, it's an easy drink to make. It's quick. It's simple. But it's also, the simplicity there's something beautiful too, I think, in that of just tonic water, gin, and a little lime.
Yeah.
Making something more than the sum of its parts.
It really does. It's strange how some of the simplest drinks can do that too. And actually, one of my absolute favorites is a mocktail gin and tonic, which is 3 drops of artificial sweetener along with my tonic water and a lime wedge, and I swear it's the same thing. And it's just as refreshing and wonderful, and it's so simple, and it's really it's a bright spot in an afternoon. And I think that's amazing that the Lord gives us those tiny little tastes of things that are wonderful in their simplicity.
Yeah. No, and there's something to be said for a great crafted cocktail, of which, like that these new bartenders can do that you're like, wow. But sometimes the simple, it's just that reminder, a simple gift, so the gin and tonic. Do you have a favorite gin that
I don't have enough money to have favorite gins, so I do like small batch distilled makers gins that I come across when I'm somewhere that, hey, would you like to try our gin infused with whatever botanicals are local to wherever it's distilled? And those are lovely. But for me, I don't think I have sophisticated enough palate to differentiate certain gins to have that kind of thing, to have that kind of preference. So I would say that my favorite gin is the gin that I can buy that is inexpensive.
Yep. That's likewise. Yes. Our go-to has always been Bombay Sapphire,
Okay.
from Sam's Club, $35 for a big bottle, it works.
I love that.
Yeah. But we digress. So, food, Ty, you and I have shared a lot of memories around food.
Yeah.
And everything. What was it on my Facebook memories today? It was, the Taps beer dinners we went to a few times.
Yeah, I saw that this week. Oh my goodness. That was extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
The pairing of all the different different brews of beer, all the different varieties of beer that this microbrewery had, and then pairing them with the different courses of the meal. It's extraordinary.
It was. Yeah. No, everything always worked together, and it was, I think we went a couple times, and it was always a highlight. And I never slept well that night, but I can't understand why.
Too many flavors, too much good food.
Too much good. Yes, that must have been it. Yes, full bellies.
Well, the beers are always small, so
They were. No, they did. Yeah, no, they did a great job of just pairing the food and the beer and realizing that beer was more than Bud Light, or that microbreweries have since taken off, but this was what was this? This was back in 2007, 2008,
mhm.
where it just felt like microbreweries were beginning something better and more.
Well, I think maybe in the late '90s, the mid to late '90s, in the early 2000s, microbreweries really became the in thing, right?
Yeah.
And you had all these different, the peanut butter and jelly stout, or you had the, whatever blonde and the whatever IPA, and I think that what got lost in that, in a pursuit to make interesting beers, was developing the richness of the palate and how you could enjoy that with the things that you were pairing it with, whether that be pizza or a burger, or, in the case of taps, a 7-course meal.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And so I really appreciated um, that particular microbrewery, but also others who were more concerned with making a quality product that could span the spectrum of different things, from flavor profiles to completely light to completely stout and those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I like how it's evolved. I like how the industry's evolved too, and how many flavors there are. Different things. The reds, especially, are tremendously delicious to me.
Hmm.
I love the red lagers. I think they're really rich in flavor, and um, they're multidimensional.
Yeah.
Having them with a certain savory food brings out a different flavor than when you're having them with a sweeter course.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I do have my preferences,
Yeah.
uh, but
Likewise. Yeah. And I've always veered towards those breweries and beers that aren't trying to just be unique for uniqueness sake. I feel like some breweries have just wanted to brew like totally abstract off the wall
yeah,
beers versus just, okay, how do we do something, again, to return to the simplicity act? How do we do something with the simple hops and the grains and make something that just tastes good, you know,
yeah,
and a consistent tastes good. Yeah, I'm not one for fads or uniqueness, just for the sake of it. But yeah, anyway, um, what about food for you? Where, as you think about your own journey, where
mm.
where has food been transformative for you, and even then, where has it been harmful at times, maybe, or destructive, if you have those stories?
Oh my gosh, Andrew, I wish I'd known about that question. Yeah, so we didn't have a lot of money growing up. My mom, my mother, she was a single mother um, for most of my childhood, um, and things were hard. I mean, it was tough, and I think, as it is today, unhealthy food is cheapest, right? And it's sad to say that, and I don't mean that in a political way at all. I just mean to say that you can fill a belly with flour, and it's not necessarily the healthiest thing. Um, and so for me, I can remember being young, and really food played zero part in my life at all,
Hmm.
um, until I got out on my own and I got to choose what I would eat. And as a matter of saying, oh, I can afford to choose these things, I ate too much, or I ate unhealthily. So I can remember times in my childhood where we had powdered FDA, uh, government eggs and government peanut butter and government cheese, which is fantastic cheese, by the way. It's like perfect, and they don't make it anymore. But there came a time in my adult life where I was going to prove that I wasn't what my self image of me was. And so I indulged in equally unhealthy um, eating habits. And I used food as a way to self medicate a lot of times too, um, which, man, just led to all sorts of disappointing results, not just physically, but eating out. I was harder on the servers because I had put all this weight on this dining experience that the server had to be perfect, or else they had ruined this experience. Or this $30 steak had to be absolutely perfect, or they had ruined this experience. There was no real dining for the sake of enjoying the meal. It was me trying to fill this um, void of identity at the table. And I think that maybe there's a greater expression in that too, because as I've become more mature, like now when I go out to restaurants, I often don't read the menu. I'll ask the server to surprise me with something or just to bring me something, because I want to be served. I want to take what's given to me and be grateful for it. I want to eat from a place of contentment, and I want to dine from a place of contentment. And in the same way, as I began to have a family, I put these extraordinarily unreal expectations upon my wife to have this meal made, or to make sure our kids were eating this or that, as though other people were seeing what we were eating. And I'd have to be ashamed to say that, I fed my kids ramen noodles when that was really all they wanted. They wanted dino chicken nuggets.
Yep.
And, and by the way, I wish I had a dino chicken nugget here in Brazil. I don't. So I think in so many ways, my growing up years and experience with food created some maybe unhealthy expectations of what food was supposed to do, that I had to relearn as I matured in my adult years. And I'd like to say that I've solved all those issues and unpacked all those bags, but I seem to fill them up every now and then with, Doritos and whatnot. But I think I've taken a different mentality to the table and to consuming now than I used to have. So I'm not binge eating to satisfy the sadness, or I'm not eating unhealthily to self-medicate in some unhealthy way.
So what would you say it then is guiding your eating habits? If it's not binging and it's not looking for satisfaction, psychologically, spiritually,
Yeah.
what?
Well, now it's my hunger, my actual hunger guides it now. I mean, I usually, there are all sorts of opinions, and my goodness, I don't, want to hurt anybody's feelings about when I ought to eat or not eat. But I think I've just become so accustomed to eating at the normal times that, I thought, oh, well, it's breakfast time. I need to have some breakfast. And I would have breakfast and not even be hungry. And I found myself really recently here in our ministry. We were praying and fasting to raise a certain amount of money to buy some land to move and to begin ministry in this neighborhood. And we'd begun this 40 days of prayer and fasting. And we'd also engaged in prayer and fasting with our local church here, and fasting for, other reasons as well. And what I found in those times of fasting was that I was really more content than I thought I was, that I really wasn't as physically hungry as I had thought I was. And now when I am hungry, it might be, not until noon or 1 in the afternoon. It might be the only meal I have, but I'm so much more grateful as I'm eating. I find it easier to be thankful. I find it easier to reflect and be and thankful for what I am eating. But I also am able to enjoy it so much more. Like today, I made for myself a hamburger. and I didn't just, make a hamburger and, have a bun and smear it with stuff and do it. I began by, making my patty deliberately while my pan was heating up. And I used coarse ground salt, and I let the pan heat up well with a little bit of oil, added some butter, put the burger on, reduced the heat, covered it, and then I worried about toasting my bun. And I toasted my bun and I pulled it off and I wrapped it in foil so it would stay warm while it was there. And then I began making an egg on the side to put on the burger. And I have this cheese, which is native to this region of Brazil. Um, and I had shredded a little bit of it to put on the burger and on the bun. And I was very deliberate. It took me about 20 minutes to make the burger. And I wrapped it all in foil, constructed, on the bun and everything, wrapped it back in the foil and let it rest for about 3 minutes. And it stayed warm. And then I sat down with my water and ate my burger and read the book of Ephesians. And it was really, really good. And yeah, I probably won't be hungry again until later today.
Mm-hmm.
And so in many ways, I just think my perception of food has changed from this thing that I have to have to this thing that I get to have. And I get to choose. I mean, oh my goodness. How blessed am I that I actually get to choose what I'm going to eat? Unlike some people that I've lived with in Mozambique who don't get to choose.
Right.
They get what they get, period.
Yeah.
What they can catch from the ocean, what they can collect at low tide, or what they can literally afford. And so I would say that, in my, I don't want to say maturity, because I'm definitely not mature, but as I have matured and am maturing, the Lord has really changed my heart for food. And it's not that I don't enjoy it and still, don't crave certain flavors, right? There's a Chef Gary Menez beef falling off the bone experience that I definitely want to experience again with you.
Barbecue was something else.
Man, I don't know what he does. It's like witchcraft. No.
Well, then we were enjoying a McClellan 17 sherry cask that just like by itself was like, oh my gosh, this is too much. But with that beef,
oh my goodness.
I'm trying not to cuss, but that was one of those moments where like,
it is so good, right? The sauce. Like, what did he do with that sauce? It wasn't just brown sugar and vinegar and tomato and the things that you put in barbecue sauce, but there was one of the things that I have learned, and I don't want to lose the point of your question about what I've experienced as I've matured, but from day to day, my experience is different. And the living in that day to day with a different mentality and experience of food allows me to have those precious moments where I can remember that flavor of that sauce. I can remember exactly what that sauce did with that whiskey, did with that beef when we had it. And you and I have had 2 or 3 things I know in our lifetime, maybe more than that, but you and I have both eaten it. And we've looked at each other after our first or second bite and had tears in our eyes because of the experience we're having, right?
Yeah. Well, one of those, yeah. So this was during COVID, and it was for my 40th birthday, Claire just told me to go visit Ty because we hadn't been able to see each other for 3 years. They had been on their own journey. Heather had breast cancer. You guys were on this really hard journey. Yeah. But she gave me a week just to go visit you guys. And we got that Chef Gary barbecue takeout because it was, this was November of 2020. LA, nothing was open still. I don't think, and Chef Gary, a mentor of mine in the culinary world, was doing takeout barbecue, and he had this Waygu beef rib that he had smoked on his custom-made grill with
olive and eucalyptus wood.
Something crazy wood that he had hand selected from California. And Chef Gary's he really cares about the Provence and the terroir, and the locality of his food. And so that's one of those moments where it's just this sublime beef. But I think the first moment demonstrates, the expanse of what food experiences, because it wasn't a Wagyu beef rib.
I know where you're going.
It was a donut.
On a sidewalk, no less.
On a sidewalk, on a grassy knoll along Route 66.
In Glendora, California.
Yes. So the donut man. So
good.
Yeah, this was fall of 2008. I had just started culinary school, and my culinary professors in Pasadena, I was at Le Cordon Bleu, they kept talking about the donut man and how during peach and strawberry season in California, he would just get fresh peaches and fresh strawberries, which there's no words to describe that
None.
a great California strawberry, like, or a great California peach, like. But during the heights of those seasons, he gets those ingredients, gets a glazed donut, cuts it in half, and stuffs it full of fresh fruit. And so Ty and I, being mature lovers of good food, decided that we needed to take this journey and try it. So one Saturday morning, we drove up to Glendora and we got this peach donut. And it's one of those moments where, like, we both took a bite, we looked at each other, and we just giggled.
Yeah. Giggled and wept.
Yeah. And it's one of those moments that you can't replicate.
No.
We didn't ask for it.
Mm-mm.
We weren't anticipating it.
I think what was so amazing about that is the absurdity that someone had managed to take this glazed donut with this fresh fruit. Why has no one else thought of this? Why has there, I mean, the absurdity of the simplicity of these two things with this fresh glazed fruit and this fresh glazed donut married together, and I'm eating them together, and it's like heaven on earth.
Right. Yeah.
Why hasn't anybody thought of this until now? Why am I 40 years old and having this for the first time in my life?
When it's literally been 15 minutes from our homes, you know. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like, again, a donut is nothing. Like, there is no redeeming qualities of a donut. Like, I eat a donut now and I regret myself for the rest of the day.
you're almost like, why did I waste the calories and the effort to eat that donut?
Right. But usually it's with my girls, and so I suffer from my
It's okay.
girls.
Yeah. I mean, you got to do what you got to do as a dad. Yeah.
And so here's a donut that is just causing Ty and I an ethereal experience, or I think of just this resonant experience where we came in contact with something more, but a donut. Like, it's still a donut, Ty. Like, that's where I'm like, and even to this day, I've had that peach donut. I've had the strawberry donut.
Yeah.
But it's not the same.
No. Well, and I think there is something about the first time you experience something versus the fifth time or the third time. I think that, again, I don't know if it's expectation of memory or the feeling, right? So the only example I can give is this. You know, I had a pastor, a missionary in Morocco, ask me one time after I was visiting him for the second time. He said, "What is one of your happiest memories from childhood?" And it took me a while to remember my happiest memory. And I said, "Oh, I know what it is. It would be when I was, 5 years old, and it would be making cinnamon rolls with my daddy." And as anyone who knows me knows, I at that time, I had spent like 15, 17 years pursuing the perfect cinnamon roll recipe. And until he had asked me that question, I had absolutely zero idea as to why I cared about making good cinnamon rolls. And when he asked that question, it clicked. I got it. And I was like, oh my goodness. This is why I care so much about this. Of all the memories that I could have chosen when he asked me about my dad, when he asked me about, the happiest memory from your childhood, and I came up with this memory with my daddy, and I'm thinking about making cinnamon rolls, I suddenly realized, it was, I don't know how, but I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, I've been chasing this recipe. I've been doing this recipe for so many years because that was what I wanted. And so I think sometimes when we refresh ourselves with the flavor that we're used to, it never quite satisfies, right? Because we can't marry the first time that we did something with the experience of that first time, also, and the anticipation and the buildup. And man, you could preach a sermon about a lot of different things in your life about that, right? But yeah, that is what you're giving up when you do that. And yeah, so it's sort of like a never meet your heroes thing. Don't try the peach donut at Donut Man in Glendora, California, because you'll never be the same. But absolutely do go try that donut.
Right.
But that's I think that's why. And so I think that's another reason why it's so important to keep them at the proper perspective, right? That it's a true blessing. It's a miracle that we get to even enjoy this. That we even have taste buds.
Right.
That we even have taste buds that register pleasant things.
Yeah. And more than that, olfactory senses that can detect, tens of thousands of smells and stuff, for good and for bad.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. But that reminds me, like, as you've been talking, I keep coming back to this quote. I'm not going to get it word for word, but it's from Alexander Shimamon, who's an Eastern Orthodox writer, theologian. But like, he starts his book For the Life of the World talking about that man was created as a hungry being. And, as you've talked, as you've shared about, this hunger, both for good and for bad, right? Like food is never the end. It's it feels always like a means to an end. That puts us in touch with something more, whether it's lost relationships, whether it's longing for daddy, whether it's just the joy of a meal shared with friends. But like, food is never the end. It doesn't, and when we make it the end, when you were talking about just filling yourself, it's like when food becomes the end, then we're on to a destructive path.
Right.
But does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. Because I think that was the moment that I realized that, I was being so unhealthy in my personal habits, unhealthy in my expectations for how my wife performed, her evening. Hey, I'm going to make a meal. I don't want to call it responsibility or duty, because that's just, it was her turn. But this unhealthy expectation that I placed on that, it was all because of that. And it's so unfair. It's so unfair to this. It's so unfair to the precious people in our life, but it's also unfair to the complete stranger at Denny's, right? Like, she's supposed to know the entire weight of my life story and why this grand slam needs to be perfect for me. Right. It's just unfair. It's unrealistic, and it's really, like you said, it's destructive. It leads us onto this destructive path of unhealthy consumption, but also it removes the element of what that was intended to do, right? I mean, at its core, the purpose of food is to nourish, right? I mean, God in His mercy made a way for us to continue living. I don't want to, I don't know, to steal your thunder or speak on your behalf, but I think that's at its core, that's the purpose of it. And I think when I started to place too much importance on those other things, I just really lost sight of why I could be so grateful and so thankful for this simple meal, even if it was dino chicken nuggets and beans and wieners and whatever else it was. It doesn't matter, right? No. Because the purpose of this meal is the communion, is the nourishment of my soul, not just my body, but my soul, in this sacred space of partaking something that is divine.
And that reminds me, we're all connected too. Like, food, you can't eat alone. You never eat alone. Like,
No.
you know,
Even if you physically are eating alone, you're not eating alone. Somebody else in that moment is also eating.
is also eating and made it possible for you to eat. And
Absolutely.
so you're never eating unconnected from humanity, from the soil, from the earth,
From creation.
yeah, right. You know, and so that's always been the beauty of food for me, is this idea that it reminds us and reminds me of our interdependency, you know, not just on God, but on each other. Like,
Mm.
you know, and we're removed from it now, like given the technology, given, which has been great, right? Like, it's not bad, but you know, like I get boneless, skinless chicken breasts, you know, and my girls think chicken just shows up, right? Like vegetables just,
It comes in a tray.
yeah, right. Yeah. Like, we're just removed from a lot of what food production is. And again, this isn't, but you know, we lose something
Yeah.
in some respects.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
because even when
still
you're, no, go ahead.
I still remember the first time that uh, my kids, picked out a chicken in Mozambique.
Hmm.
You know, and it
Yeah.
wasn't, it didn't come wrapped in plastic. Um, it came with feathers on, and
Yeah.
thankfully somebody else took care of that for me. But still, it was a process.
Yeah. No, for sure. Um, yeah. No, food is, there's so many dimensions, you know, that it's just like you go down one rabbit hole with food, but you go down every other rabbit hole. Like, part of me is like, oh yeah, having young kids, and my girls have been picky eaters, which feels like a cruel joke given that we love to cook good food. You know, my girls like Kraft mac and cheese, but at the same time, I'm like, it's still food, and there's a moment still to share.
I think the thing I love about that though is, when I met the lovely Heather, when I met my wife, um, I remember it was our first date, and I asked her what her favorite restaurant was, and she said McDonald's. And the man half of me is like, oh, snatch that girl up now. I mean, that's like, my goodness. But I'm so thankful that God at least made me concerned enough, um, you know, in my pursuit of her, to ask a question. Why is that? Why do you like McDonald's so much? And for her, it was an emotional connection,
Hmm.
because my daddy took me there on our daddy-daughter dates, and he would take me for pancakes, or he would take me for a Happy Meal. And so, you could argue the the health benefit and nutrition in McDonald's, or even Kraft macaroni and cheese, or Dino chicken nuggets, but in the end, what a beautiful thing that your girls, just like my daughter, just like my sons, they're going to grow up and they're going to have a memory of, you know, Kraft box dinner with mom and dad, and that
Mm-hmm.
that flavor, however vile and whatever I may think, they're gonna go, wow, I just love that. It reminds me of home. It reminds me of mom and dad. It reminds me of when we get a care package while we were living in Mozambique or Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't replace that.
No, no, because it's never about the food, but it still is about the food in some weird way that I can't fully grasp myself.
Yeah.
Because you and I also, one of my favorite food memories that you and I have shared was with our lovely wives. At the time, it was my girlfriend Claire. But for my birthday, this would have been winter of 2009, December. I think it was December 6th, 2009.
Oh
Not
yeah,
that I
I
remember
know.
the dates, but I do. Um, but my parents gave us money to go have dinner at Chef Gary's restaurant. He at the time was cooking at Marche, I
Yeah.
think in Burbank.
Yeah, Thousand Oaks, Burbank, somewhere like that.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And I talked to him beforehand, and he's like, yeah, come and we'll feed you. Um,
We had no idea what to expect.
no. And I told them sort of what the money I had, and food just kept coming that night.
And wine pairings kept coming.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was everything from cauliflower soup with truffles um, to vegetables. Chef Gary can make vegetables sing.
I I thought I'm eating carrots, and I think I'm eating steak.
Yeah.
That's so flavorful and so rich and savory. My wife, the lovely Heather, still talks about that white truffle risotto even today.
Yeah. Oh, I do too.
Her favorite food. Like, you could ask her what's the best thing you've ever eaten. She'll say that.
Right. Yeah. And he gives us a plate of white truffle risotto. And at this point, I'm thinking, did he misunderstand me, that he thought that I had $200 per person to spend? Like, I'm sweating bullets. Like, I am in grad school. I am dirt poor. Like, and I'm thinking, oh gosh,
Yeah.
like, all right, we're on a journey right now. Like, right.
Enjoy the ride. We'll wash dishes later.
Yeah, I'll figure it out later. Right. Like, and Claire has somewhat of a similar story as Heather, of like, she didn't grow up with this type of food, and I didn't grow up with this type of food either. But being in the culinary world, cooking, like, I'd had more experiences, and so Claire is just, she doesn't know what to do with herself, and but she's enjoying it. We're all enjoying it. I think it's that moment where Claire realizes she could just bathe in Chef Gary's soups. Like, his soups for her are always something she loves. But yeah, food just kept coming. Then it was seafood, and then it was pork, and then it was steak. I don't even remember.
Yeah, it's all a blur, from the amuse-bouche and the little quail egg foam thing.
Oh, yeah, I don't even remember that.
I mean, it's like a blur from that to the sorbet. I remember something in between there. It was like, I don't know, there were cups, there were glasses, and there were, just enough wine to, to taste each and to experience the flavor of the something. And then, I just remember him, and I don't know if this was that night or if it was the next time we went back, but I remember him poking out of the kitchen at one of our times with this big slab of meat, going, "Hey, I'm going to put this in the oven for you. I'm going to roast this."
That was for your birthday. He gave
Might
us
have been
for your cote de boeuf.
Oh my goodness, man!
Yeah,
something else.
Right, but then all of a sudden, so we're eating, and I'm sweating bullets, but still enjoying, trying to be present to all the flavors, right? Because it's a bite, and then all of a sudden, the check comes, and it was for the exact amount I had told him, tax, tip, everything. It was just, we're good,
It's just a piece of paper with a number written on it, I think.
Yeah. Like, I think, and he figured out how to make sure his server got what his server needed that night. But it was just one of those beautiful gifts of hospitality. That just,
I think about that night. I think about what you just said. It was a gift of hospitality because, the dollar figure is completely unbalanced, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's completely out of whack. And what I remember about him in that moment when we're talking about it and expressing our gratitude to him was, he said, "It was such a pleasure to cook for you, Andrew." And he said, "I love you." And I was just like, that whole meal for him was a labor of love. It was this, it was his gift to you. Right.
And
yeah. Oh, and I just think, so it absolutely was a gift of hospitality, but it was so much more. It's a debt of love, right? It was a gift from the heart. In the same way that, my mom, my mom makes things for me today. Or, when I make brownies for my daughter when she asks, or I make, cookies on the cookieth. The ninth of the month is the cookieth in our house.
Nice.
So that no one has to ask if I'll bake something in the month. We at least have one day that we know that I'll make something. And years ago, when we were first here in Brazil, we decided it would be the ninth because it was the ninth on that day. But regardless of the cost of whatever that recipe is, I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
Even if we have to scrimp and save, even if we have to substitute things, I'm still going to make this thing because I know that that's the thing that you want. I know that is going to hit you here.
Right.
I know that it's not just going to fill your belly, but it's going to warm your heart. It's going to bring a happiness to your soul. So I'm going to go out of my way to make that.
Yeah.
I think that's what Gary was doing.
No, for sure. Yeah.
I think that's what he does every day too. And it's why does he have 1 or 2 Michelin stars?
He has 1, I think, still.
Yeah. Well, that's one more than a lot of people.
Well, exactly. No, it's a huge accomplishment. Yeah. No, and I need to get Chef Gary on here just because.
Well, that would be great.
You talk about somebody that's influenced me, he's taught me more about vegetables and simplicity. That's actually, the simplicity that he operates from is actually way more difficult than braising short ribs, with 30 ingredients.
Yeah.
Just because there's no room to hide.
Because he believes that, celery has a beautiful inherent flavor to itself.
Yeah.
And that carrots have a beautiful inherent flavor unto themselves, and that God
Right.
made them the way that he did for a reason, and that they ought to be cooked that way.
Exactly. And treated with respect,
That's right.
Yeah.
And man, do I love that he does that.
I do too. Yeah. No, he's famous for this fruit and veggie platter at his little counter where it's at least 20 different fruits and vegetables that are just plated. There's no coherence to the dish, and yet there is coherence. But it's 20 fruits and vegetables that are just expertly prepared, so you can taste what actually something should taste like. And so it's just, there's something very beautiful about that dish that, every time I eat it, it's lovely, Yeah, it takes care.
So am I allowed to refill my drink?
You're allowed to do whatever you want, Ty, because we're almost done,
Okay.
But, Ty's preparing one more drink before. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
So, but before we go, a few sort of end with some questions, and maybe you've answered them, but I think it would be fun just, to see what people say about these 3 rapid fire questions. So,
oh no.
Is there, what is one food you refuse to eat?
Peas. That's not true. I just had this conversation with Heather this morning. I was remembering the time that I was poor, and I had nothing left in my house. Nothing. I was on my own the first time. I was 22 years old, and I still had a can of peas. And I was so hungry, I ate the peas. And she said, you don't like them because you didn't prepare them the right way. And I'm telling her I didn't like them because I don't like them. So I'll eat peas if they're in like shepherd's pie or whatever, but I won't just eat peas unless they're fresh, super fresh, and Chef Gary prepares them.
For sure. Absolutely. Yes. Again. So what's the best thing you've ever eaten then?
The best thing I've ever eaten. Yeah, Wagyu beef.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Has to be it.
Okay.
It melted. How do you put meat in your mouth and it melts and it dissolves?
Right. But still had chew. It wasn't like crock pot meat.
No. But I mean, it.
Yeah.
There. Oh man.
Yeah.
That has to be it.
Okay. And finally, there's a conversation amongst chefs about last meals. Like if you knew you only had one last meal to enjoy, And it's morbid, I get it, but it also, I think, speaks to something. And there's actually a book that came out years ago about it by chefs. But Ty, if you had one last meal, what would it be?
Oh man, one last meal. And I can pick and choose components from different
Yeah,
places and different times.
it's a blank slate.
Yeah, this is going to be overly simplistic, but this I think speaks to how ordinary a person I am too. It would be um, the Jack in the Box ultimate breakfast sandwich.
And I thought we could be friends.
uh, a Jack in the Box ultimate breakfast sandwich and tater tots from Sonic.
Wow.
I don't. You and I have had many discussions about potatoes.
Yes.
And I love potatoes, and so it could just as easily be any kind of burger and tater tots or whatever. I think I've come so far in my food journey that I'm really like I'm so content with the simplest of flavors, and I love the Jack in the Box Ultimate Breakfast Sandwich because it's cheesy and meaty, and it's an egg sandwich, which from my youth was kind of a staple because my mom, the first food my mom ever taught me how to cook was a scrambled egg, and so I'd have scrambled egg and toast,
Yep.
and so the Jack in the Box Ultimate Breakfast Sandwich is like a step up from a regular egg sandwich, but tater tots. Man, I don't know who thought it was a good idea to take baked potatoes and form them into a thing and then fry them up into a little nugget.
Yeah.
But whoever decided to do that,
Good
thank you.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of tater tots in Flagstaff, and they, especially at bars, and you're like, this is like one place has this like curry tater tot where it's just curry sauce on top of tater tots.
What?
Yeah.
Oh,
They also
my.
have like the biggest selection of whiskey.
Well, I think there is actually a marriage between the drinks that you serve and the varieties of potatoes.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, Ty, this has been a joy and a privilege.
Oh.
Thanks for joining me and starting this journey. If people want to get in touch with you, where could they find you?
They can find me online at the2ten.org. That's e210.org. And they can just send an email through the website.
Awesome. Reach out to Ty. They're doing some amazing work in Brazil and Mozambique. And so if you're interested, do reach out to them. Again, it's e210.org. Thanks for joining us on this first pilot episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Have a great day, everybody. Bye. Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider subscribing and reviewing The Biggest Table wherever you find your podcast. Until next time, may you find something beautiful at the table, whatever you are eating, with whomever you are sharing it with. Ciao.